Hello and welcome to this live Zoomy Zoom, or welcome to this YouTube video, or maybe welcome to this episode of the Ripples podcast because we are triple tasking today. My name is Paul Wesselman, but most people know me as the Ripples guy, except for people who know me as Uncle Paul or Cal Polly or any of my other nicknames. And I'm so excited to be with a few members of the Team Ripples Patreon community this evening. They are part of a group of people who pitch in a few bucks a month to help me keep the ripples flowing outward. And we are still at over 20,000 people getting ripples every Monday. And that costs money. And you all cover the cost of that and printing up a whole bunch of other fun stuff, including a surprise we may be mentioning when we go off the air today. Let's keep this dateless and timeless. And we have we're calling this Summer Sizzle. This is one of the types of meetings where I've got a collection of things that I have been picking up from various sources that I'm going to process with you all tonight. We're going to follow the same today. We're going to follow the same format that we do with the weekly Ripples emails, Pebble, Boulder, Ponder. In the emails, of course, the pebble and the boulder are two inspirational quotes combined with some sort of theme, connected with a theme. And the ponder is a couple paragraphs that I usually write. And in here, our pebble is going to be a resource I'm going to tell you about in a second, and something I'm using in my work or in my life. And the boulder is an activity that I do professionally or personally. And then the ponder is a collection of tonight. I think if we get to it, we'll have 5 different little things I want to tell you about. And then we will turn off the recording and we will hang out and chat, and I will tell you a couple secrets. And we were talking about, I see Carol left a note about the Rockies too. Yay. I am excited to share all of this with you. So let's jump in. And our pebble tonight is actually, Don, you inspired this share that I have. Several, let's see, let me get to how do I forward my slides? I've forgotten how to forward my slides. Okay, so Pebble, Boulder, Ponder. Several weeks ago, it may have even been a few months ago, Don, who's on the call tonight, just shared as a quote submission this little Facebook meme or social media meme that's just a black box that has a whole list of things you can control. And it your beliefs, your attitude, your thoughts, da 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 da. And I liked it. I put it, it didn't feel exactly right for Ripples, but I'm like, I want to do something with this. This is intriguing. And it sat over there. And then a few weeks ago, I've been tinkering around a little bit, trying to figure out how all of this AI stuff works and these LLMs, large language models. And I coincidentally came back and noticed this things you can control list. And I had this vision of the fact that right now there are so many things beyond our control, so many things going on in the world and in our country and in politics and da 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 that are beyond our control, is that maybe the idea of this list is good, and maybe Chat GPT can help me expand this list. And we ended up, and so I said, here's what I want, here's what I like about this. Can we expand this and have some fun with it? And let me get over to, for people who are with me live, you know that I often put little links in the chat window, which I'm going to show you a PDF right now. And for those of you listening to the recording, please know that the show notes, either on YouTube or on the podcast, should have all of the links that I'm sharing in the chat. And so what I came up with was this document that has 101 things I can control, and it has these different categories: inner life, mindset, emotional expression and communication, values and integrity, kindness and connection, presence and joyful living, habits and daily choices, self-regulation and resilience. And it was fun. I was finding the limitations of AI and the opportunities, and it did some things really, really well. And then it didn't understand that I wanted to have one continuous numbering. And then when it did that, it all of a sudden added a whole bunch more. And then when I looked further, it's just it started repeating them. And so I was scolding my chat, stop doing that. And it was like, I'm sorry, Paul, I'm trying to fix this. And we were having an interesting conversation. Um, and what was interesting to me is this list did exactly what Don's little original, the square that he shared with me, is it really does help us not ignore the things that are beyond our control, because that's not a purpose of these types of activities, but it puts it in a larger context so that while it is very true that there's a lot of things going on around the world and maybe even in our personal lives that are beyond our control, that doesn't change the fact that there are still things that are within our influence and are within our control. And so, if you would like, you are welcome to print this out and put this somewhere. I printed it out, and of course, the paper disappears because of the virtual screen. But there, I caught just as I reviewed it tonight, I caught a couple things that I thought, oh, did did chat? I by the way, you'll see at the bottom it says assembled by the Ripples guy with help from Don and also Chad GP Thomas. And I named my chat GPT Chad because it sounds like chat. And then I gave the GPT part of it. I put Thomas as his last name since my middle name is Thomas, after Thomas Merton. And then I wanted GP to be his middle initials. And I asked Chad for help in figuring out what his middle initials should be. And we came up with growth partners since he helps me grow. So Chad, growth partner Thomas, was a great help to me, as were you, Don. So thank you for that. And that takes us to our boulder. And this is from an article that I read. I will pop the, need to get back to my list here. I will put, this is from a Washington Post article. And I try whenever I use a media that has a paywall. I pay. I know some people. Well, anyway, we're not going to go there. I I use gift links so that everyone can access the article that I'm talking about. And this was something called Japanese walking. The 20 years ago, some researchers in Japan identified this form of exercise they call interval walking training (IWT), and it their original research had these really profound um, effects on the people who, middle-aged and older people who were sedentary, and started these very simple. It's just 30 minutes of walking and 3 minutes fast and 3 minutes slow. 3 minutes fast, 3 minutes slow. And lower blood pressure, better aerobic capacity. And oddly, they were very excited by the third result of stronger thigh muscles. I'm not sure why they were so excited about that. Okay. But here's what's interesting. So this caught on. One of the things I really found interesting is that one of the control groups in these studies did exercise, and one of them did just 30 minutes of walking, and some of them even did 30 minutes of fast walking. But what they found that was really powerful is after the study ended, 3 to 6 months later, the control group folks mostly were not continuing to exercise. But when they checked back in with the people who were doing the 3 minute intervals, they said depending on the study group, 60 to 90% of the study participants were still exercising. And what they reported was that because it was more interesting, and in some cases, people thought it was more fun. They've since replicated the study using different variables and different control groups. But what they found is this 3 minutes fast, 3 minutes slow for just 30 minutes. The second round of studies improve cholesterol levels, improve flexibility, lowered the body mass index, which some people are saying is not a good measure of health anyway. But I still think that's interesting. And cardiorespiratory endurance. And then very recently in 2023, some researchers here in the US replicated it and are now finding things like people who do this interval walking training, IWT, are getting better sleep. They have improved cognitive function and they have better mood regulation. And I will tell you, since I read this article 2 months ago, a month ago, I have adapted the 3 minutes fast, 3 minutes slow to 6 minutes fast, 6 minutes slow, because I generally walk for an hour in the morning. And so I just wanted to see, and doing an hour of three on, three off seemed like that would take forever. So I doubled it to six. And I will tell you this, I am walking farther. I am feeling better an hour or two after my walk than I usually do. It's much more fun. And even when I'm walking with my friend John, we just set a timer. You know, the Apple Watch lets me set my 6 minutes timer. And then when the 6 minute timer goes off, there's a little button in the bottom corner to just reset the 6 minutes. And we are actually having to add how much, like how far we go to walk because our goal is to get an hour of exercise in. So that's kind of fun. I highly recommend trying it. Consult a physician first. I am not a physician or a physical trainer. All the appropriate things to say there. And I kind of was weirded out. So they called it Japanese walking. The original study was in Japan, but the Washington Post reporter did a good job of saying we went back and asked the researchers, and they said that this name has sort of stuck, this nickname is stuck because of the source, but it's not that more people in Japan are actually doing this than in other cultures. So I suspect this name just sounds potentially a little like, is this being racist or something? I suspect they'll go back and keep calling it IWT. End of rant. End of caution. So let's talk about our ponderables today. If I don't take too many tangents, which, if you know me, the chances are slim, um, we're going to try to get to all five things: Joyspan, wind phone, hacking happy hormones, self-compassion, T versus F, and eliminating, a term I was very excited to, actually several terms here. It's like a vocabulary. There's a bunch of things I'd never heard of today. And let me see, I do have links for most of these things. So why don't I go ahead and, well, the joy span is from an article that I didn't have an original source to, and is from a book that just came out called The Art and Joy, and it's called Joyspan, The Art and Science of Thriving in Life's Second Half. And the author coined this term joy span. Um, it, Obviously, lifespan talks about how long you live. And more you will see in health and well-being articles and writing and research talking about health span. So if a lifespan is how many years you live, your health span is how many years you live healthy, relatively healthy life. And she felt like there's a next level, and that is your joy span, not only how long you live healthy, but how long you enjoy living. And she ended up looking at a research she developed. What was the name of that? There was some term that she came up with that she measured some things, but they came up with four actions that she believes are helpful to boosting people's joy span, how much they enjoy life. And it's grow, adapt, give, and connect. So I'm just going to just briefly go over those four things. And they're all things that I think we talk about here in different ways. So I don't think there's any real surprises, but I really liked this. I tend to like lists like this that give us some just a few things to think about. The first one is growing. Growth is the desire to explore and learn. Having a sense of curiosity and a willingness to learn helps maintain cognitive function and mental health in older adults. Not a big surprise. Look at you showing up to a learning event in some of your free time. We all get grow points just for showing up tonight. Adapting. Analysis of 15 studies on successful aging suggests that being able to adapt to your circumstances later in life is key. Expecting that things are going to change as we age helps not only manage our expectations, but allow us to ask some questions. List and what she said is a really good way to adapt is think about some things as you're aging that actually are getting better. Yes, there's some things declining, and some examples. Do you care less about what others think of you? Do you have greater experience when it comes to problem solving? Is it possible that you're less reactive than you used to be? Um, and I really, it just really resonated with me that along with acknowledging, yes, there are some things, there are certain ways that my body is changing, my cognitive skills are changing as I age. There are some things that continue to get better. And adapting to the declines or the changes that I'm not so excited about, part of that adapting is accepting that that's part of our reality and then countering with, and what are some changes that are happening that maybe are good? And giving whenever we can go from what can somebody else do for me or what am I need that somebody should help me with to how can I help somebody else helps us remember what our capacities, what we have to offer, the gifts that we still have, time, attention, patience, wisdom, kindness, and then connecting. Research shows that social connecting connections are vital for well-being, and as true as it is that sometimes as we age, our friends can get fewer and far away. We get to a point and we start having to say goodbye to them. And our quality of friendships can increase. We've got more years to reach back to people like Todd, who I know from my Carbondale days, like so many of you that I know from some speaking engagement a gazillion years ago. Don, tell Leslie, I just heard from somebody who found out about me from the Pennsylvania Library Association event so many years ago. Love that. And it takes a lot of time and energy sometimes to when we don't have a college campus that we can go hop on and move into a res hall to meet a bunch of people in 5 minutes, and it's worth it. And one of the other articles that I ended up not having time to or not having we had to I had to peel out of this list for tonight was some really interesting research that says short interactions with strangers actually has some positive benefits that they're now able to measure, and just little random stranger interactions that are 30 seconds to a minute long can actually give us a boost and help us feel more connected in the world, even if that's not going to be a relationship that we're like, if we're never going to see them again, it still counts it as a connection point. I thought that was powerful. So joy span, think about your joy span. You think about your lifespan, think about your health span, and think about your joy span too. Intriguing. Um, This next one was, I feel like maybe I should have called this a vocabulary night because I feel like I'm introducing these terms and these ideas that were new to me. This next one is called a win phone. I had never heard of this. And this was also an article from the Washington Post. And it was about a couple who lost their children in a car accident and had learned about this concept of what's called a wind phone. And it is, I guess you would call it like art in a way, where people set up a place with a rotary phone that is not connected. And the idea is it's a place where people can go and talk to somebody who's gone. And I believe the article said there's something like 300 wind phones around the US, and there's hundreds and hundreds of them around the world now. And they set up this, let me see, I think I actually snagged a picture. So if you're watching the video, you can see that the family was on their way to move to Joshua Tree when the accident happened that took their kids' lives. And so they chose a place in Joshua Tree to put this, and they found this curio cabinet that they decided looked something like a phone booth. And so there's a phone, a yellow rotary phone in there, and a pad of paper where people can write down the date and who they called if they want. And they described this woman, this part of the couple that created this particular wind wind phone talked about the first time she sat down, she made the first call, and how it was a different conversation that she had had with her kids than the many, many times she had been talking to them since they died. And that just really moved me. And it's interesting as I was putting together this list, this my first thought was this is different than the others in that it's a little heavier, it's a little sadder. And then I thought that's exactly why we need to include that in this list because grief is such a big part of all of our lives, and it's a natural part of all of our lives. And back in that previous conversation we were just talking about with Joyspan about connecting with people, and why on earth would we not include connecting with people that are not in our lives anymore, but that we miss as part of that powerful connection? So I don't know if anyone has if anyone's ever been to a wind phone in our discussion, I'll be curious to hear because this was a new concept for me. All right, so we're doing good. We're going to get through our list. So let me see if I can get us back to a visual. Yes. So hacking happy hormones. I have heard of these of four hormones being called the happy hormones or the happiness hormones. This was such a simple here. This was such a simple little Facebook reel that just had some music playing in the background and had a list of activities that trigger each of the four happy hormones. And it just was so random, and I saved it because I thought it was intriguing, and I put it into my snippets and ideas file, and it was just sitting there. And then just a quick Google allowed me to find a good article that the little Facebook reel was based on, and it was and it made for a good combo because the article doesn't do a good job of adding a nice little list, and the Facebook reel just has four ideas for each of the four things. So I'll just really quickly tell you dopamine, it's called the feel good hormone, serotonin, which is a mood regulator, sleep, appetite, digestion, learning ability, memory, oxytocin, often called the love hormone. It's interesting, essential for childbirth, breastfeeding, strong parent-child bonding, also helps promote trust, empathy, and bonding in relationships. Levels generally naturally increase when people are physically affectionate with each other. And then endorphins, pain reliever. So these are things that swoop in and lessen pain in response to stress or discomfort. And it says also may increase when you do certain rewarding activities. So for dopamine, this very simple task, listening to upbeat music, getting good rest, eating a sweet treat like dark chocolate, completing a small daily task. I really liked how this list just came up with not a list of 200. I mean, you can go get on your AI or you can go Google longer lists if you need help brainstorming. But like for serotonin, again, it was just really simple. Go for a walk, get out in the sunshine, cardio exercises, meditation. And oxytocin, hugging someone, the physical affection was kind of obvious, but I like the cooking a meal for somebody that you care about. I thought that was interesting. Talking with peers and something, again, as simple as petting a pet can elicit oxytocin. And then for endorphins, I also appreciated that they tapped into different senses. Watching comedy, which we know creates really powerful laughter, is just an incredibly intense releaser of endorphin and actually boosts the immune system too. Burning essential oils, which is something that I hadn't thought about. I love doing, and I usually have eucalyptus, but when I got into this little machine, I forgot what you call it, nebulizer, diffuser, I bought a whole bunch of other essential oils that I don't really tap into. So it kind of got me thinking about pulling some of those out. And then it mentioned chocolate again. So I really feel like the moral of the story is to eat chocolate in, mindful amounts. But, dark chocolate, it's practically a vegetable. That's what somebody told me. Hmm. Self-compassion. Okay, this is such a small thing, but it really struck me as a powerful distinction that I hadn't seen anywhere before. This was in um I've talked about Dan Harris's 10% Happier podcast before. Dan Harris was the ABC reporter many moons ago. A lot of us knew him from being on television regularly, and he happened to have a nervous breakdown, a panic attack, I think he called it, on live on the air on ABC News one night. And he ended up seeking out meditation as a part of the how do I deal with this? How do I keep this from happening again? And became a meditation teacher. And this podcast, his book, Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics, and his podcast is really different than a lot of other teachers because it really is for people who are sort of skeptical a little bit or think it's that meditation is woo woo. And so he interviews a lot of really well known people in the meditation world, but he does it from a take of what's this really all about? He sort of helps people who are still looking askance at the idea. And this was a really tiny point in an episode a couple months ago that made a distinction between two types of self compassion: tender self compassion and fierce self compassion. And I don't, I think I had just tended to put self compassion as being gentle with yourself only. And the point they made, tender self compassion is about accepting things. And fierce self compassion is about taking action to help change things. And I really like the idea uh, of being able to be tender, accepting myself as I am, not needing myself to be any different, and being okay with a mistake I made or that I didn't deliver in a way that I hoped I would or I thought I was going to, and really being tender. And when it's time, the fierce self compassion is when I can step up and say, okay, how do we prevent that from happening again? Or how do we improve so that we can be in a different state of mind in the future? And a while back, I don't know if you remember, we talked about polarities and this idea that sometimes when things seem like they're the opposite of each other, instead of saying this or that, it's better to think of them as polarities, poles that we need both of and in the right amount, and that too much of either is unhelpful, not enough of either is unhelpful. And this just really spoke to me as when we talk about polarities, we think about a figure eight on the side, that sort of infinity signal, and that we cycle between two things. And and I invite you to wonder right now which form of self-compassion might be useful for you to focus on. Do you do you need to be a little more tender and patient with yourself? Or is there room for some fiercer self-compassion? Say, all right, self, we've sat on this for a while. We've struggled with this. What if we do something about it? And I certainly think it's possible that the answer is both and, right? Like it might be that we need to be compassionate in certain ways and be fierce in other ways. So spend some time thinking about tender versus fierce self-compassion. Did I put that in there? Yes. And the whole episode is about the whole frickin' I don't think I've ever listened to an episode of Dan Harris's podcast that I haven't been fascinated and paused it to take notes. I've got two things coming up. I'm actually working on an issue of Ripples for a couple of weeks where I'm quoting something from a more recent episode. Tender versus fierce. Okay, we've got one more. Lemonading. Lemonade. I'm like instantly I'm in just because I love lemonade. Um, Researchers tout the power of playfulness in tough times. So the concept of lemonading is the idea of finding ways. It's based on the phrase "when life hands you lemon, make lemonade." The idea of actively trying to be more playful and find positive ways to nurture yourself and nurture other people around you in tough times. But there's something really, really important about the definition that I want to point out. Let me read it, and then I'm going to emphasize something. Creatively imagining and pursuing positive possibilities to cultivate adaptive, enjoyable experiences while maintaining a clear eyed realism about challenges. So I'm going to pause just because I thought about making a screen with that in it and I didn't. So I am going to go ahead and stick the definition in there in the chat so I can read that again. Creatively imagining and pursuing positive possibilities to cultivate adaptive, enjoyable experiences while maintaining a clear-eyed realism. And and I I think so much about being able to be optimistic, focusing on the positive. There is a tendency that I think is the term toxic positivity really correctly points out is when people are putting on rose-colored lenses and refuse that filter out the bad in the world. And what I like about this concept is it's not about ignoring. It's about contextualizing. It's about saying, big world we live in, lots and lots of yuck. How can we enjoy a glass of lemonade? How can we have some fun in here as part of our survival, as part of our reviving, as part of our thriving? Um, and it turns out that people who practice activities like this and consciously expend effort thinking, how can I be playful even in hard times? They have higher levels of resilience when dealing with difficult stuff. It doesn't make um, problems go away, but it gives us internal strength to be able to handle them, to have the strength and endurance. Actually, you know what? It was earlier. I was trying to remember a trait scale, and it was for this article. She created what was called the adult playfulness trait scale to try to measure this, like how are well are people doing at lemonading. And what struck me as interesting about this instrument is that it's trying to measure three things that I think when I say these will make a lot of sense to you. They did for me. Fun seeking motivation. So how motivated we are to actually seek out fun. Uninhibitedness. So like being willing to do things without caring so much about what other people think that it keeps us from doing the things we want. And then the third piece is spontaneity, our willingness to just think of something and say, what the heck, let's go do this. So I'll say those three again: fun seeking motivation. So actually, like going, what can I do that's fun? And then being uninhibited, being willing to be goofy or to go try the thing, even if we're feeling a little awkward. Not that we don't care at all what other people think or how we might be perceived, but that it doesn't keep us from stepping out and trying something new or something fun. And then spontaneity, which I think um, the story in my head anyway when I read that it really resonated with me is how often we get into an anxiety loop or we get in a worried where we're like, oh, what are the consequences of that going to be? And is this responsible of me? And I think our willingness to go, oh, this sounds fun, let's do it. Again, in the context of risk management, of course. Uh, but I found that to be awesome. And I suspect. Huh, I hadn't thought of this. I suspect that this summer sizzle session is a relatively spontaneous because I usually, I book these out 6 weeks in advance. I make sure it's on your calendar. I make plans for it. And I just really a couple weeks ago, I was missing you, and my August schedule is kind of quirky. And I was like, when am I going to do this? I'm like, I want to do it now. And so I threw it together pretty quickly, and you showed up. So you eliminated with me, which is pretty awesome. Oh, so that's our five things plus a pebble and a boulder. And I think we're going to wind down the recording for the podcast episode and the YouTube video by saying this little smorgasbord, this little sample the buffet, if you will, um, is an opportunity for you to think about what resonated with me as I was listening to this. What did I want to go click and learn more about, or what did I just want to go do or tell someone about? I love the Richard Bach quote, "We teach best what we most need to learn." So if there was something in this that really spoke to you, I dare you within 24 hours, I dare you to tell somebody about it. Say, I listened to this goofy guy and he had this idea. Let me tell you about it a little bit because teaching it to somebody, it makes it go to a deeper place in our brain. And if it's true that we teach best what we most need to learn, talking about it to somebody else will help it sink deeper into and it might encourage us to do something, to remember it and to do something with it. So thank you for watching and thank you for listening. And I will see you next time.